Hi everyone, and welcome to Chefy Things, where on this episode we will be making fluffy cinnamon rolls perfect for the holiday season. So let's begin by talking about our ingredients. So the part that makes this dough fluffy is that we're going to be making a flour paste. So this is used in traditional Japanese and some Chinese breads. With this paste, what it does is that it actually gelatinizes the flour and allows the flour itself to absorb more moisture, and also it allows for an extra fluffy, long-lasting cinnamon roll if you're able to control yourself. So we're going to get started today by making the paste, and then we'll move on to the actual dough portion of this. To begin making the flour paste, we're going to start out with 3 ounces of bread flour, which adds more gluten and helps with the overall structure of your dough itself. And we're going to go in with 8 fluid ounces of room temperature water, or cold. Doesn't matter the temperature. So we're going to take and whisk this together. So I am doing this stovetop, but you can actually make this on the microwave. Not on the microwave, in the microwave. You can make this flour paste in the microwave. If you are using that method, make sure to stop it about every 15 to 20 seconds to take and agitate and stir this together. But the overall goal is that this is going to be like a thick, almost pudding-like consistency. So you'll see what I'm talking about after I get this cooked. I'm just mixing it together to get out all of the lumps and make sure that there's no dry bits of flour left behind. So now I'm gonna put this cooking. Let's go to the stovetop. So I'm cooking this mixture over about medium heat. You can turn it up, but as soon as it starts to thicken, it goes pretty quickly. So you do want to make sure that you're stirring this quite often. It'll start to thicken and kind of pull up at the bottom of the pot, so you need to make sure you're stirring constantly and agitating it. If you come close, you'll start to see there's some thick spots in it. If it starts to get a little too thick too quickly, that's okay. And it's okay if there's little lumps and bumps in it. So you see how it's thickened up significantly. So as you can see, it's a lot thicker of a consistency, and it will actually help to provide more moisture and make it super fluffy for the dough. Heading back to the counter so we can get to working on our actual dough. So our mixture is nice and really thick. So now what we're gonna do is take and place it into our mixer bowl, add some of our other ingredients, and get this dough rolling. Making sure and use my rubber spatula. So I am actually going to use the whisk for this first portion, and I'm just going to mix it by hand before I get this onto the mixer itself. Make sure you get every last bit. I've had cinnamon rolls last to at least a week or so in the refrigerator. Once heated, they're still just nice, light and fluffy as they were the day that they were made. So now I have my flour paste into my mixer bowl. Now I'm going to go in with 8 fluid ounces of milk. And so the temperature of the flour paste is actually going to warm up the milk. And so it'll be a more ideal temperature for yeast. So I'm going to take and kind of whisk this together, get this incorporated. And then I'm going again with 2 eggs as well. And then I'm whisking this together to go ahead and break up those yolks so everything truly gets incorporated. And this is going to be mixed together with a dough hook. So sometimes the yolks itself take a little bit longer to break apart. So the whisk just helps to break everything up. It doesn't have to be a super homogeneous mixture. I'll just do some love taps. Scrape every last bit out because eggs are still expensive. So now we're going in with instant yeast, which is a little under 1/2 ounce. So 0.4 ounces. And then we're gonna go in with 22 ounces of bread flour. And of course, if you don't want to go out and make a specialty purchase for bread flour, all-purpose will do. And we're gonna go ahead and get this beginning portion of the dough mixing. So you wanna turn it on a very low speed to begin the mixing process, just to make sure you don't get any flour in your face, or it, just splattered everywhere and you have to work on cleanup. It will take a little bit of time for the dough hook to actually pull our flour together. Just be patient. You can turn up the speed just about 1 or 2, or you can take about halfway through the beginning of this process, stop and scrape down your bowl. I am gonna go ahead and stop it and give it a scrape down just to make sure I get everything at the very, very bottom of the bowl. So all is included and incorporated. No bits left behind. So I'm gonna put it back on and begin mixing it again just to make sure all flour is incorporated. So this is gonna mix for about 2 minutes initially to make sure all of the flour is incorporated and there's no left behind ingredients. So just like that, our dough is, for the most part, all of our flour and dough has come together. And so some of you might actually be questioning, what about the rest of our ingredients? So say like salt or sugar, because this is a cinnamon roll, which is a sweet recipe. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna actually let this, what we like to call autolyze, which is where the yeast is feeding off of the sugar, which of course is going to be found in milk, rather than just the granulated sugar, which we'll add in a little bit later time frame. So we're gonna let our dough rest for a little bit before we work any more gluten in, and that's where we're gonna add our salt and our sugar. Then last but not least, we're gonna add in some butter. So we're gonna go ahead and let this rest for about 15 minutes, give or take. Make sure you cover it. You can use either a tea towel or cover with saran wrap. And so we'll do that, set a 15-minute timer, and we'll be back shortly. Alrighty, so it's been 15 minutes. As you can see, my dough has risen. Now we're gonna get it back onto the mixer and begin adding our salt and sugar, which we'll incorporate for about 5 minutes. I would suggest using iodized salt, but for today, I'm using a Himalayan pink salt, which for the most part, there's a few little clumps, but they come out and it's nice and fine texture. So this is about 0.4 ounces. And then for the sugar, it's about 2.1 ounces. Once this is mixed together for about 5 minutes, the dough is going to be a little bit smoother in texture, and all of the granulated sugar and salt will be absorbed within the dough. And then we'll begin working in some softened, unsalted butter. Of course, if you are using salted, go ahead and take a little bit of the salt that you probably just didn't add in to incorporate for that and account for that. But in this case, unsalted is the way to go. You can truly control the amount of salt being put into your dough and into each recipe. So all of my mixture hasn't come together, and you'll see that there's not really any remnants of the salt or the sugar left behind. We're gonna go ahead and get the mixer bowl back onto the mixer and begin working in about 3 ounces of that unsalted softened butter. That's a tongue twister. Unsalted salted butter, unsalted softened butter, unsalted softened butter. So I'm adding in smaller bits of butter, and we want to try and get this all incorporated. You'll see that the dough is just kind of sticking around on the dough hook itself. It'll move around. This is a stickier dough, so it is going to kind of stick to the bottom of the bowl, but it'll pull away from the sides. Also, this way your hands get nice and moisturized with butter. Do recommend still washing them afterwards. Don't recommend licking them because it's unsalted butter. Dropping little bits at a time. So what's happening is that the butter is actually coating the flour molecules and kind of helping so it doesn't form too much more gluten. This is also how quite a bit of enriched bread, so say your brioche or challah, they're actually made as well. The dough will also be a lot stickier immediately after, and you'll see remnants of the butter around the sides of the bowl as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn it up to about medium speed. The goal is that we want our dough to be nice and smooth. It's kind of sticking around the dough hook itself without kind of sticking to the sides. If there's a little stickage on the bottom, that's a-okay. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn it up and mix for about 5 minutes. So my dough has been mixing for about 5 minutes. As we can see here shortly, the dough is nice and smooth. It is a little sticky, but it's sticking all around the dough hook itself and the very bottom of the bowl, really kind of cleaning and pulling away from the sides of the bowl as well. So now what I'm going to take and do is transfer it into some sort of vessel or container that it can double in size and still have room to grow if necessary. I'm going to take and spray it with a little bit of non-stick spray. This is avocado oil in a reusable spray bottle. Absolutely comes in clutch all the time. And I'm going to use my handy dandy bowl scrape to make sure everything comes out of it. I'm actually going to grab a little bit of the oil inside right here. And what I have going on in the back, if you've watched any of my previous videos, I'm going to create a proof box, which is what we use in the industry to speed up the fermentation process. So that is going to happen by boiling some water. I'm using my electric kettle, and then I'm going to take and place it into a vessel that can go into the oven, and then take and stick this dough in there as well. And so what it'll do, it will create humidity and speed up the process. I like playing with the dough, so I'm working quickly to take and tuck it under so it creates a nice and smooth surface, and it'll rise a little bit more evenly. This is not necessary unless you like playing with dough. So I'm gonna take and place that in there, get my last few little scraps of dough. So as you can see where it's measuring, hold on, I'm gonna take and mark it about right there, give or take a little bit of space. We'll see how much it does grow. Then I'm going to take and use my very small, very normal size of saran wrap to cover the top of this with. Shout out Sam's. You don't have to struggle with saran wrap whenever you get this big thing. Highly recommend. If you have this space and you use saran wrap, do yourself a favor. Now this is going to go into the oven. I'm going to take and pour my boiling water into a pie pan, which is going to go into my oven. The steam is going to create the humidity necessary for this to double in size a lot quicker than it taking an hour to an hour and a half. This will take about 30 to 45-ish minutes. So let's see about getting that going, and then we'll be able to move on to the next portion. Make sure you go ahead and do not open that oven. You're creating the steam for a reason. Leave it shut, turn on your oven light if you need to look at it, but set a timer, work on cleanup, and take a rest. My timer just went off. The dough has been in for about 45 minutes. Let's go ahead and take a look and see if it's doubled in size. So we can definitely see that our dough has doubled for sure in size. Now I'm going to open it up, and if you were to press on it, it's sticky, but it bounces back really, really slow. I'm going to actually take and grease up or dampen my hand a little bit to help with that, and we're punching it down to release the carbon dioxide within it. Slightly damp hands are your friend here. And you need to let this rest for just a little bit, just in case we reactivate any gluten. But as I wait, I'm going to take and use my handy dandy flour sifter to dust the surface with some flour. Also, the great part about this is that you can make the dough ahead of time and actually let it ferment in your refrigerator overnight. This dough is easier to work with whenever it's chilled slightly, as it is not quite as sticky. Take and get as much as I can so we can have every last bit of cinnamon roll. And today, just to kind of tie in the holiday spirit, if you didn't notice, there's a few food decorations here in the kitchen. Our Christmas tree is food and pop culture. There's no cutesy theme to it. So I'm gonna find a pretty side. I'm gonna stretch it out with my hands right now to get a rough shape of a rectangle. When in doubt, add more flour. less likely to stick. And the goal is we're looking for our dough to be about 1/2 inch thick, which we already have that in some areas. So we have to be, I'm actually gonna fold this over. If an area starts to get too thin, go ahead and fold it over. Maybe allow your dough to rest if it starts to bounce back on you. And we're gonna go ahead and begin rolling this out to roughly about a 20 by 15 inch rectangle. But the goal is we're just looking for about 1/2 inch thick. Also, every once in a while during your process of rolling, make sure that you're moving your dough around. You don't always have to lift up your dough fully like I just did to move it around, but make sure it's not sticking to your surface. So when you're rolling, roll half away and half towards. Even pressure. Take and come in. Dust the surface with a little more flour. So for today's episode, half of this dough will be rolled into a cinnamon roll like normal, but the other half I'm gonna try making a cinnamon roll wreath, perfect for this holiday season. And as you can see, there are some bubbles that are forming with our dough. So like a little air bubble right there. You can always work with your hands as well to kind of get in, move some of it out if you need to. So we have our rectangle rolled out. Now I'm gonna go in with about 4 ounces of unsalted, very, very soft butter. Before I put the butter on, I'm gonna leave about 1/2 to 1/4 inch of a base for myself to make sure that whenever this is rolled up, it's got something to stick to. If we put the filling all the way to the edge, it will be harder for you to actually get that log rolled up and everything nice and sealed and secure. All right, so now I'm gonna take and spread this out. Get all the way to the edges. You can, if you want to be absolutely perfect, you can take and cut off the edges and use those for testers, or just go ahead and cut it and make it into one of the cinnamon rolls so there's no waste. So next up, we're gonna go in with our sugar. So for this recipe, you can use brown sugar, you can use granulated sugar, or you can hit it with a combo, which is what I'm doing. So the brown sugar is gonna make it a little chewy, a little bit more of a molasses flavor. And I'm adding, about 1 ounce of cinnamon. If you're not super huge on cinnamon, cut back on it. Remember, whatever your heart desires. These are just rough measurements. Also with this, you could take and go in and add your favorite nut of choice. So I've done some pecans in this. You could switch and maybe do like a Nutella filling, but of course we're making cinnamon rolls. Its name is in it, so we're gonna use cinnamon for this. And you're just gonna struggle in this very small bowl to get it mixed together. Get a larger bowl if you would like, or if it spills, I feel like that's a-okay. And then whenever I say liberally sprinkle it on, liberally sprinkle it on. Get in there with your hands. I mean, obviously if you have any cuts on your hands, you need to wear gloves. Long fingernails, gloves. I have neither of those things, and nobody that I don't know is not going to eat this. All right, pushing all the way out. Remember, leave your little space. So as you can see, we have a very hearty and healthy coating of sugar, all in moderation. Please keep that in mind. I'm gonna rewash my hands, get set up and ready for the rolling and cutting process. Hands are nice and clean once again. So now I'm gonna begin the rolling process. So I'm gonna start on one end, rolling up. It'll try and untuck, but then you start coming back and rolling. This is very soothing. Give it a little tuck if you need to. So I added a little bit more flour as my dough got a little sticky and started to actually tear because it was so thin on this one end. That's okay. We'll go with the flow on this. It's Christmas time. There's other things to worry about. So we're gonna take and pinch it together, sealing that seam. And then I've dusted the surface of the top of this really nicely as I have it upside down, trying to get flour out. Then I'm gonna gently roll it over. I'm gonna hit the top of this with a little more flour. Okay, there we go. Let's see, how long is this log? 12, 24, about 25 inches in length. All right, I'm gonna try and squeeze it just a little bit together so we have exactly 24. So in theory, this is about 24 inches in length. So you could get 24 1-inch cinnamon rolls. We're gonna do it a little bit differently. Also, the thickness on your cinnamon roll comes down to your preference. If you want a super thick, extra fluffy, voluptuous, voluminous, bodacious cinnamon roll, I would say about 1.5 to 2 inches. If you want something tiny and petite so you don't feel bad eating multiples, I would say 1 inch or less, give or take. So we're gonna cut those about 1.25 inches, which for me, I measured it, it's about 2 of my fingers right here. So I'll take and go through cutting that. There's multiple ways to cut it. Today, I'm using a serrated knife. You could also use unflavored floss. This is not the time to go look and dig and find that free floss that you got from your dentist that you totally use. Definitely not peppermint, definitely not cinnamon. So unflavored or just a serrated knife that we're gonna go with. So I'm gonna get this marked up and then get these cut and onto the tray, and then I'll show you a demo on how to make the wreath. So I went ahead and marked out my cinnamon roll cuts, and then I'm just going in very gently, actually using the teeth of my serrated knife in a sawing motion to come through. And then I'm just setting it to the side right now. Once I get all of these cut, I'll take and place them onto my trays. I'm gonna go ahead and put it on these two so I can use this larger pan for my wreath. So I'm taking, and just to make sure it's nice and sealed, I'm gonna take and pull the seam, placing it down. And also the seam side I'm placing inwards. So if it decides at some point that it's gonna try and start to unravel, it's gonna unravel towards and inwards versus being outwards and looking like a tail. So you can put these close together or spread them out a little bit, comes up to your preference. This could be baked in a 9x13 dish or some dish of your choice, cute little holiday dish, which I need to put that on my wish list. So we're gonna go ahead and put this right here as I work on the other cinnamon roll wreath, and then from there it'll go back into the oven to where we allow them to proof. All right, so that gives me 14. So I'm gonna do 1-inch slices instead. And I'm gonna cut only about 2/3 of the way through. I say 2/3 to about 3/4 of the way through. So I can actually take and fan this out to where it'll be kind of like a pull apart. Once again, take and do yourself a favor and mark these so you know what you're working with. I'm sure if you did the whole portion of the dough, you can make a lot larger of a wreath. So before I continue to cut through and get this shaped, I'm gonna go ahead and transfer onto my pan. There's less likely a chance for a whole lot of disaster to occur and less moving around once it's cut to this full extent. So remember, going about 2/3 of the way through with cutting. This is gonna be pretty. You can see all of the stripes. Alrighty, now comes the fun part. Moving this around and fanning it out. Hey, that looks cool. I've taken it and arranged it by fanning them out. They're slightly overlapping one another and cascading. Whatever you see that you don't necessarily like can be always covered up with icing, or that's the piece that you just go ahead and grab. Now these are ready to go back in my oven, aka the proof box, for them to double in size and be ready to be baked. Also, this is a great stopping point for yourself if you are preparing this on Christmas Eve, so you have fresh fluffy cinnamon rolls for Christmas Day. Take and cover this with some saran wrap and place it into the refrigerator. And by the next morning, they should have doubled in size to where you can just get your oven preheated and have fresh hot cinnamon rolls for Christmas Day. Set a timer for about 30 minutes to check on them, see if they need some more time to double in size, but we'll check back in shortly. My timer just went off on the cinnamon rolls. I'm gonna go and take a look at them. Also, I'm gonna go ahead and pull them out a little bit before they've doubled in size. Just that way I will have time for my oven to get preheated, and then we can pop those cinnamon rolls in to bake. Let's check. Wow. Yeah, they've doubled. Woohoo! Set temperature to 375 to work on preheating. As you can see, voila. So these have definitely doubled in size. Press on it, it's bouncing back nice and slow. Leaves an indentation. This is where if you are using a pan that has a little bit more of a lip, or they're a little bit closer together, or even right now, if you happen to have a little bit of heavy cream on hand, I currently am out right now, but you can pour a little bit of heavy cream over. It'll add a little bit more moisture to this and a little bit more richness. These cinnamon rolls are quite rich as well already. We have a powdered sugar glaze that's gonna go on top of it shortly, but I'm gonna get this oven preheated, get them put in, and then we'll work on that glaze while these are baking. Our oven is nice and preheated, which we're baking at 375 degrees. These will take between 12 and 15 minutes, maybe a little bit longer. What I'm looking for is a light golden brown color. And then also doing this very carefully, you'll take and kind of pull the middle. If it pulls back really slow, you may need to let it cook for a little bit more, or you see any sign of doughiness, which there's nothing wrong with doughiness, just not undercooked. Also, if you're pulling this straight from the refrigerator, if you refrigerated them and chilled them overnight for that proofing process, they are going to take a lot longer as everything's a little bit cooler. So keep an eye on that, going between like 25-ish minutes. I know that's not super technical, but ovens are all different. All right, let's get these in the oven and quit yapping like my husband does.
Not funny.
So next up, we're gonna work on our basic powdered sugar glaze. I am starting out by sifting together 12 ounces of powdered sugar. You can sift and make as much icing as you want. Today I am using water versus milk just because it'll have a longer shelf life. Milk adds more richness, but I don't think it compromises the flavor. Sifting it together to make sure there's no lumps, and we have a nice smooth icing. I like sifting onto a piece of parchment paper so I can funnel it back in. I don't have to worry about the icing and the powdered sugar going everywhere. It's a little bit more controlled. Make sure you get every last bit out. Love taps all around. Going in. Whoop. Nice funnel. Looks like I might overwhelm this bowl, but I promise as soon as liquid hits this, it's going to dissolve and get very low and small, so no overcrowding. So now I'm gonna go in with a little bit of salt and some homemade vanilla. Nice vanilla beans. Let me get my salt real quick. I'm using about 1/4 teaspoon of salt, 2 ounces of water. And I like to go ahead and dissolve my vanilla in the water or liquid itself. That way there's less likely a chance of any like little brown clumps. I'm going heavy on the vanilla. It looks like a nice, pretty amber color. So I'm gonna go ahead and begin whisking. Immediately starting to dissolve. Now this recipe does say between 2 and 4 ounces of liquid. That comes down to your preference. Do you want a super thick icing, or would you like more of a glaze to where it's nice and light and it's kind of opaque where you can see through it? Also, with the thicker the icing, whenever the cinnamon rolls come right out of the oven, it'll take and kind of melt over the top. I want mine to be a little bit thinner of consistency, so I'll probably go in about 1 ounce more. Start with half. And this is just a very general recipe that covers all of the cinnamon rolls nice and light. You can always double this and make a lot of glaze if you like a lot of glaze. Also, the cinnamon rolls are really nice on their own without icing, but you know, the sweeter the better for some. All right, I like this consistency to where it's a nice drizzle. So that'll be a point where I stop. And as soon as those cinnamon rolls come out of the oven, we'll let them cool for a little bit and then we'll work on icing them. Also, something that I want to remind you is that with us doing multiple pans, I like to take halfway through the baking process, rotate the pans from the top shelf to the bottom, and then rotate the pans as well so there's nice and even cooking throughout. Some ovens have some hotter sides and hotter spots and cooler spots as well. My timer just went off and I am taking a look at my other rolls. I pulled out my wreath as it needed to come out a little bit sooner as it was on the bottom rack. They went for about, let's see, 14 and 5, 19 to 20 minutes, give or take. Oh yeah. Look at those. Multi-talented, ladies and gents. Look at those cinnamon rolls. It smells absolutely amazing in the house. And you know, if you need your house to smell good, make cinnamon rolls. Alrighty, so these cinnamon rolls need to cool off a little bit before we put our glaze on. I went ahead and threw together some colored glaze to decorate our wreath with, and then also top them with some gold nonpareils as well for an extra holiday touch. Also with this process, while we're waiting, I'll demo how to make a parchment paper piping bag. So first off, we're gonna start off with a triangle. From here, I'm gonna start on my left, or my right, actually your left, how you're looking at it. You're gonna make a circle around and pull through. So this is gonna be one ear of your, I don't know of what, but an ear. And then we're gonna take the other one and go around and make it nice and tight at the bottom. All right, so fold it down once, fold it down twice. Not as pretty, but ta-da, TV magic. Here we go. So this is great for whenever you need just a piping bag for a little something and don't feel like getting out a plastic piping bag, or maybe you don't have piping bags available at your house. You could also use a Ziploc bag as well and cut the end off, but I had parchment paper that I used, AKA, this is the powdered sugar parchment. Reuse before you throw away. My cinnamon rolls are pretty cool, so I'm gonna go ahead and ice them. I did go ahead just for convenience for myself. I put my white icing in a piping bag, and then using those parchment paper piping bags that I made for the colored icing to go onto the wreath, I'm gonna go ahead and cut it. I'm gonna do about a 1/4 of an inch. All right, so I like to take and drizzle. Is this the traditional way of icing a cinnamon roll? No. Do you have to be traditional with whatever you're making? No. Do as little or as much icing as your little heart desires or can handle. The higher you go, the further it drizzles. I'm gonna leave 2 uniced because I like some uniced. And then right here, going in. This is kind of giving king cake vibes. I'm excited for Mardi Gras season here in Louisiana. King cake videos will be happening. All right, set this to the side. So for the piping bag, this is kind of like a single use bag. So this is not best for using for multiple times. I'm gonna take and cut a small and take and continue to roll it down. If you wanted to color all of the icing for the wreath, you could totally do that. All right, I'm gonna stop right there. Go in with my red, fold in the corners, and then roll downwards. All right. Go in with that red. It's giving Grinch vibes. All right. And then, you know, just to get extra chefy, drop a few little pearls for the Christmas spirit. These cinnamon rolls look so good and definitely ready to eat. I'm gonna go ahead and give one a try. They're still a little warm. Gonna break off a piece. Look at how fluffy. You can see how fluffy that is. Okay. It's super fluffy, very light and airy. The cinnamon is really nice. The icing is not too overpowering where it takes away. It just adds to it, and it's perfect for the holiday season. Thank you all so much for joining me today on this episode of Chefy Things, where we discuss fluffy cinnamon rolls that are perfect for this holiday season, just like this wreath. I hope everyone enjoys this. Y'all have a wonderful day. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and a Happy New Year to you and your family.